Welcome to Monaco, to be precise, the very tight and congested Formula One paddock with all the team's motorhomes squashed into this pier sticking out into the Mediterranean. And of course it's a Formula One paddock with a dark shadow over it this week because we had on Monday the tragic news of the loss of the legendary Niki Lauda, who of course until his lung transplant operation last August wasn't ever present in the Formula One paddock, and still it's hard to believe that the great man is no longer with us. I'm joined by Giorgio Piola, who knew Niki Lauda very, very well, and of course Niki Lauda's arrival in Formula One and yours are only a few years apart. You just beat him to it, but obviously you'll have dealt with him extensively over the past nearly 50 years.
Yeah, also because I was a journalist for Gazzetta dello Sport, so I had to make always interview. So I spoke with him a lot. And before you said we lost a man, that's the point. Niki had two lives for me. The one before the accident, it was quite very difficult to be a journalist and talking with him because he was very technical, nearly a driver computer, much more than Schumacher, for example. So he was talking not so much, he was very shy, and he was talking only about the cars, and let's say nearly not giving any concession to the human side. After the accident, I found a completely different man. I had to understand slowly because at the beginning the difference was so big, but you have to understand that he wanted to live again. So he made his birth by himself, not because of his mother. After the terrible accident in Nürburgring, everybody would have stopped with Formula One. He wanted, and nearly less than 2 months he came in Monza. It was a big shock because every time he was taking out his balaclava, there was the blood coming out, so he was suffering a lot. He really built his life, and he built like a man, a real man, very, very deep, very human. He completely, I tell you, two different persons. And it's good because the second person was even better than the other one. The other one was only a wonderful driver. The second person was still a wonderful driver and a wonderful man.
And of course it is life-defining, that accident he had at Nürburgring in 1976. But the amazing thing about Niki Lauda, Giorgio, is that determination he had. Because to him it seemed that he had to come back that quickly. He almost won the World Championship, and of course he pulled out of the Japanese Grand Prix at the end of the season in terrible rain because of the conditions, and he still might have beaten James Hunt to the championship. So we keep hearing people pay tribute to him, telling about this determined character, this sort of straight talking, no nonsense. It's fascinating to hear you say that almost that character was what he became after the accident.
And you have to understand also that he was a very straightforward man. For example, Mauro Forghieri, the chief engineer of Ferrari, when it happened in Fuji, he wanted to find an excuse, a mechanical failure to the car, and he said, no way, I can't drive it. So he was totally honest, even sometimes quite brutal, aggressive, and he loved always to say what he's thinking. And it was very funny because after the accident, and then he was staying with Ferrari, we were talking in Italian, and his Italian was really very funny because, of course, you learn from the mechanic. So a lot of, if you say rude words, but when he was saying something, even 3 lines, you could make a wonderful feature because he was always point to the most important fact. He was very sincere, very tough, very honest with everybody and with him himself.
Well, of course, this honesty from Niki Lauda you talked about, he never really was a politician, was he? Which is strange, really, because he did work in those sorts of circles. But, you know, if something went wrong, if there was something that the team hadn't done correctly, obviously there was a famous disqualification.
Yeah, it's happening in Belgium, and of course I went there to make the interview, and you know, usually the driver, when they are disqualified, they start to complain like a little child, say it's not right, I drove, I risked my life, I won the race, it's not fair to disqualify me. And his McLaren was underweight, and in a very typical Italian with some rude word, he said, my team was really very bad, but he used a tougher word, and myself, I played the fool because I drove an illegal car. No excuse, just black and white.
And of course this was something that continued to be Niki Lauda's trademark even after Formula One, because of course he was a regular in the Formula One paddock. He later was an advisor to Ferrari for many years, his RTL television work in Germany, and then in 2010 when the Mercedes Formula One team, actually just behind us we've got the Mercedes motorhome, he became the non-executive chairman of that team and played a key role in creating this team. And to me it seems appropriate that when Niki passed away, his team had just taken 5 consecutive 1-2 finishes, a show of supreme dominance greater than anything they'd even done before.
And it's a pity that he had to stop his career, because I'm sure he could have won other World Championship title. And as you said, even in his role with Mercedes, was really always very loyal, very pushing, very close to the driver, very close, for example, to Hamilton also, and the relationship with the driver were very good. Maybe sometime he forgot that Niki Lauda and Clay Regazzoni, they make nearly 3 or 4 accidents with Ferrari, making collision with themselves, because at that time was the first Niki, he was much more aggressive. But anyway, talking again about Mercedes and Ferrari, I remember the last time that I talked with him, he said something that now I can say because there will be no problem anymore. But he said, for my work, for my profession, I'm a Mercedes. But when a Ferrari win, my heart is still beating very hard, because the passion, it was really with the Ferrari.
Of course, 2 world championships for Ferrari, so he's synonymous with the team. But you mentioned the relationship with the drivers, and of course Lauda was instrumental in convincing Lewis Hamilton to jump ship from McLaren and join Mercedes ahead of 2013. It was the 2012 Singapore Grand Prix weekend, a combination of a long conversation with Lauda and another McLaren reliability problem. He had a gearbox failure while leading, perhaps convinced him to commit. And it's just, you know, the relationship he was able to have with the drivers, the understanding. They knew he knew what they were doing and he understood them, and that's a rare thing, to have somebody who understands drivers, who understands teams, who understands the corporate world as well, and all these aspects. You know, if one of these parts of Niki Lauda was his legacy, you'd think an amazing individual. But to combine all this and an 3 airline companies, just a remarkable individual.
Yes, as I tell you, he made 2 lives. And the second life for me was unbelievably like a miracle. In every aspect you can see, all what you said is fantastic, it's true. His relationship with the driver were fantastic, because the driver were trusting him. Was a man that he was saying even one word, but you were trusting him. And there are very few people that you trust so much in Formula One, because a lot of people, especially in Formula One, they are very politician. Even the driver now, they are not so straightforward, black and white like he was, and some other driver, another one, for example, Jackie Stewart, he was always fantastic, always saying what he's thinking. Niki is this. Everything he was saying, we were trusting completely, no doubt.
And as a technical driver, people always talk about his intelligence, his understanding. Obviously, this is your specialist area. And even when you were speaking to him regularly, when he was behind the wheel of the Ferrari, do you think he was one of these drivers like a Prost who really did have that deeper level of understanding?
Sure, maybe from the technical point of view, even deeper than the Prost. And it's funny because if you look in internet, there are some funny quarreling between him and Mauro Forghieri, because Mauro Forghieri, even if he's a genius and engineer, in some way was a little bit more romantic in the attitude with the technical stuff. And sometimes he was saying something that Niki didn't trust, and there was a beautiful arguing, and Niki was always very focusing on the technical aspect to improve the car. For example, in BRM, they made a big improvement following his advice, and also in Ferrari was also very good as a test driver in understanding and talking with the engineer, also with the engineer from the tire. So it was really very good, a very 100% a driver and 120% as a man.
Well, I think the Monaco Grand Prix weekend will inevitably be all about Niki Lauda and his memory. He has connections with all 3 of the top teams, Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull, of course, Dr. Helmut Marko, who he knew very well, a fellow Austrian. So I think whatever happens, all the tributes we're hearing this weekend, and I think the shadow that his loss casts over the paddock tells you exactly how important Niki Lauda was in Formula One, not just behind the wheel as a driver in his 3 world championships, but in terms of what he contributed to this paddock over the past half a century.